I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thank you for joining me for your reality news check. It is Monday. It is the 20th of February, 2012. Beginning, as we always do, with your headlines, is Whitney Houston's daughter headed to rehab. That's the word, folks. We'll tell you about it. Also today, Rick Santorum and his outlandish and outrageous comments. We'll tell you about them. Plus, a fake hamburger. Could it be coming to a restaurant near you this fall? How about that? Plus, 3 teens go on their way to prison for bullying. And also, tragedy strikes 3 skiers. And then finally, more health scares for Nick Cannon and Mariah Carey. Let's begin with the daughter of Whitney Houston. Now, is it true that the daughter, Bobby Christina, got high after the funeral? Oh, let's hope that's not true, folks. According to writer Allison Samuels, Bobby Christina Brown disappeared after her mother's funeral, saying she wanted some alone time and was reportedly found getting high. That's scary. Can someone please tell me how an 18-year-old who just lost her mother was allowed to have any alone time at all? My goodness gracious. Why wasn't somebody on this young lady like white on rice? I mean, come on. She had already been to the hospital twice with post-death breakdowns over her mom. She was clearly distraught, and somehow people left her alone. Where is this young woman's family? Now, apparently, even before the burial, the family had been talking rehab for the little girl who, you remember, reports say entered rehab for a drug problem early last year. There is trouble there, folks. And then news, of course, that several hours after the funeral, Bobby Christina reportedly found at a hotel getting high. Let's hope that if nothing else comes out of the passing of her mother, someone gets help for this troubled young lady while she's young, in time to save her. And let's hope they pull out all the stops and do absolutely everything that is necessary, no matter how long term, to get her some help. For we all know what the end of that road looks like. Okay, in other news, let's go to some business news. Now, one of the world's largest electronics manufacturers, well, it's going to raise salaries, folks. That's right, that company is in China. It's called Foxconn Technology. You know that the company has been in the news lately after a big brouhaha involving Apple. The company now announcing that it is raising salaries sharply, and they say it says it's also going to reduce overtime at its Chinese factory. Now, Foxconn says the plan to raise salaries is they're going to raise them about 25%, folks. That's to about $400 a month. How about that? Now that's how about that for nobody? Right now, the Foxconn plants apparently depend on luring migrants to work cheaply for long hours in absolutely huge factories that are the size of cities. And what they're doing is they're building your smartphones, your computers, and your other electronics. Now, we're talking long hours, folks. Workers reportedly on the assembly line 6 or 7 days a week, working as long as 14 hours a day, folks. Okay, Foxconn has 1.2 million Chinese employees that assembles an estimated 40% of the smartphones, computers, and other electronic gadgets that you're buying, and they're sold all around the world. We should tell you that nearly every global electronics company has some tie to this manufacturing giant, which is also China's single biggest exporter. Some of its campuses, as we said, are considered small cities with as many as 200,000 workers. Yeah. Well, just in case the plan, the new model of more pay and less hours does not work, now we know it's going to work for the workers, so we have to be talking about just in case it's just paying too much money for the company. Guess what they're going to do, folks? Right now, Foxconn is announcing plans to invest in millions of robots and automate aspects of production. Well, they probably got that from the U.S. Just cut the worker out as fast as you can. Eventually, of course, it will decimate your society, but they'll find that out too, like we found out here in the U.S. All right, also in business news and looking at your food supply, folks, leave it to the Dutch. Yeah. All right, Dutch scientists at Maastricht University in the Netherlands, they are on their way to producing the first lab-grown hamburger. You did hear me correctly. Apparently, the Dutch are using stem cells, that's right, folks, to create strips of muscle tissue. Now, all you got to do is add blood and artificially grow fat, folks, and voila, you've got the hamburger, okay? How about that, okay? They're hoping this will be the basis of the first lab-grown hamburger. Why do this, you must ask? Well, it's because the Dutch want to develop a more efficient way of producing meat than rearing animals. They say this could reduce the environmental footprint of meat by about 60%. And you might say that's such a silly idea, but hear me out, folks. Get this. Some experts are estimating that food production will have to double within the next 50 years to meet the requirements of a growing population. And, folks, during this time, the problem is climate change, water shortages, and greater urbanization is going to make it, they're all going to make it much more difficult to produce food. So maybe lab-grown meat could be a good solution. I don't know. I don't think I want to taste that. All right. In the race for the presidency 2012, we turn to Rick Santorum, GOP candidate, presidential hopeful, I should say. Rick Santorum, he is defending his recent positions, which many found not only outlandish, but also outrageous. He made his comments in a speech to Tea Party conservatives in Ohio over the weekend. Now, Santorum saying this about prenatal testing, and folks, I don't make this up. I'm going to quote him, quote, "We're talking about specifically prenatal testing and specifically amniocentesis, which is a procedure that actually creates a risk of having a miscarriage when you have it and is done for the purposes of identifying maladies of a child in the womb. And in many cases, and in fact in most cases, most physicians recommend, if there is a problem, they recommend an abortion," unquote. Now, first of all, I don't even know how he knows this, because I don't even know how many physicians' offices he's been in where they're recommending an abortion. But, okay, let's just go with that. Okay, let's just, for the sake of argument, let's just go with that. Santorum has no respect for women, because what does he think? We're stupid? You think if somebody recommends that somebody has an abortion, they automatically go and do it, just tiptoe through the tulips and get it done? It doesn't happen like that, okay? First of all, women actually think and have their own mind. All right, but let's go on. Here's what he said about federally funded education, not to be outdone, folks. Quote, "I'm saying that local communities and parents should be the ones in control over public education, certainly not the federal government. And I think the state governments have not done a particularly good job in public education either," unquote, okay? So the GOP wants to be president, as we all know, okay? He goes on to add this about buying a car and getting an education, folks. That's right, folks. Buying a car, Santorum says, is, quote, "designed to meet the needs of a customer. Federally or state-run education is not designed to meet the needs of the customer," unquote. Okay, Rick, first of all, don't ever compare buying a car to get an education. They are totally different, okay? Second of all, let me just say this. We want the federal government squarely in the conversation of education, because we have to have a minimum national standard that all of our people come up to in order to advance in the world. We don't need a different standard in different states. We need a minimum national standard, because some of the states, Rick, believe it or not, don't have any money, and therefore their standard is going to be lower because they don't have what they need. And let me say this, in case you think, well, they can teach it anyway, they can't. In a technology-centered world, they have got to have technology in order to teach those children. And maybe you should think about this, because you did say this. We're talking about specifically prenatal testing. I mean, come on. I don't know where you learned that, but that's all wrong. All right? Now, here's what Santorum said about President Obama's religious beliefs. He says they are not based on the Bible. Now, I got to ask you this. I am a Christian myself, but I have to ask you this. Why is it that Christians always criticize other Christians for not being a good enough Christian, and then they say they don't criticize, okay? It's just just stop being hypocritical. All right, in other news, a ski tragedy in Washington State. 3 expert skiers dead in an avalanche. Apparently they were exploring near a ski resort. It happened at an out-of-bounds area near Stevens Pass Resort. That Stevens Pass is located in the Cascade Mountains, northeast of Seattle. One woman who was swept down the mountain did survive the avalanche. From South Korea, 2 teenagers on their way to prison now because they admitted bullying a classmate until he committed suicide. These kids. Apparently, the massively misbehaved teens forced the victim to play video games. Then they took his winnings. They took his food. They beat him up. He apparently killed himself. The victim apparently killed himself by jumping off a building, but not before he named his assailant in a suicide. No, thank goodness he did. Those teens, they're both 15 years old. They'll spend the next 3.5 years in prison. I hope other kids take a lesson from this. All right, then, and finally today in celebrity news, another health scare for Nick Cannon, Mariah Carey's husband. This time it's apparently blood clots in his lungs and an enlarged right side of his heart. As a result, the super entertainer says he is lightening up on his schedule. He will end his radio show on New York's 92.3 FM. You'll remember, of course, that Cannon said last month that he was going to slow down. That was after he was hospitalized right after the New Year and treated for mild kidney failure. Now he needs to slow down right now, because as you know, Nick Cannon and Mariah Carey do have 9-month-old twins. So we do want the best for the family. We all, of course, are pulling for them, so you got to slow down, Nick. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks so much for joining us. This is your Reality News Check for February 20th, 2012. I'll see you next time. Have a great day.